This is now an appeal which India has evidently made, or at the very highest levels. The fact that the Prime Minister did meet the Emir of Qatar on the sidelines of the United Nations of the climate change conference taking place in Dubai is being seen to be linked to the fact that there are 8 Indian nationals who are on death row in Qatar following very serious allegations of espionage. Now, these allegations, the details of these have always been sketchy because a lot of the details linked to this have never been publicly shared. The families were hopeful initially that there would be a pardon which takes place. In fact, I can mention to you that close to 1 year back, these officers who worked for a company which was involved in the training of the Qatar Navy were actually told that, look, you need to leave, there are allegations about you, and they packed and were about to leave when they were in fact detained. Since then, this has been an extremely sensitive sort of issue. India has been handling it at multiple levels. When the death sentence actually came, it came as a huge surprise, not least of all for the families who at that stage felt that as a result of the active involvement of the government of India through the ambassador, through New Delhi, that they would in fact be back home for Diwali. Far from that. But since then, India has really stepped up our diplomatic efforts. It's being done delicately. It's being done obviously at very high levels as well. So earlier on, there were some problems in terms of access. That access is improved. Our ambassador has met these ex-Indian Navy officers as well. 2 hearings since their appeal against this verdict have been accepted. And so this entire issue gets looked at, obviously, by their court system. I have been in touch with the families as well, and they are very careful about what they are saying right now, but they are hoping against hope that somehow or the other their loved ones come home. But the key point that is mentioned by all the family members is that the allegations of espionage don't make any sense at all, and there have been other allegations that perhaps there could be a Pakistani hand or some other hand towards these allegations being foisted upon these ex-Indian Navy officers. There's 7 officers, 1 sailor, all of them extremely well regarded in the Indian Navy. Some of them held very important offices as well, commissions on board and command of warships as well. Tanima.
Right, Vishnu, stay with us. Let's also listen into the MEA soundbite which has come in on this story.
Prime Minister met the Amir of Qatar in Dubai on the sidelines of COP28. I think he put out a tweet. My understanding is that there are good conversation on the overall bilateral relationship as well as on the well-being of the Indian community, as he said. There have been 2 hearings. As you know, we filed an appeal, as is from the families, and the detainees had filed an appeal. 2 hearings have since been held. Meanwhile, our ambassador got consular access to meet all 8 of, in prison on 3rd of December. And as I said, this is a sensitive issue, but we will continue to follow, and whatever we can share, we will do so.
Right, let me go back to my colleague Vishnu. Vishnu, as we said, that the Indian ambassadors met the death row prisoners, and there have been 2 hearings in this case. In terms of the Indian government's efforts, which are ongoing, of course, how would you assess this particular step? You know, that there are still hearings, of course, in the sense that there is some sort of a procedure which is being followed from both sides. Of course, the Indian government making its efforts and the Qatar government also looking into this issue. But in terms of the efforts made by the Indian government so far, how hopeful are we?
Well, it really depends at this stage on Qatari authorities whether this is going to be accepted, India's appeal at the level of the courts, or whether it goes up to the Emir of Qatar, who has, of course, the right to pardon. Either way, India has been pushing at it. I think the key point that Prime Minister Modi is now directly involved, the fact that he did discuss the entire gamut of relations between India and Qatar, which is, of course, a strategic partner of India, on the sidelines of the Dubai conference on climate change, would suggest that in fact this key issue, which has been hanging in terms of relations in a sense between India and Qatar, it's something which affects the families as well. That is likely to have been discussed by the Prime Minister, number 1. Number 2, the fact that India has got additional consular access at the level of the ambassador is important. Number 3, the fact that there have been a couple of further hearings since the death sentence was pronounced is another encouraging step. Again, we do not know the details right now. The Qatar Government has been extremely quiet about it. The government of India telling us that this is an extremely sensitive issue, but the allegations of espionage have been denied by the families and officials that we have been speaking to off the record, saying that no, look, we don't believe that there is any espionage or anything of that sort. So how did these men land themselves in this mess? That remains unclear. But the bottom line is that there is an active Indian diplomatic effort at ensuring that they get home.
That's right, Vishnu. In fact, as you mentioned, that the details of this entire case has in fact been, of course, for obvious reasons, very sensitive and not been disclosed much from either side. But just to refresh the memory of our viewers, if you can just give us a chronology of the events as they happened.
Well, these were 7 officers, ex-Indian Navy, retired, and 1 sailor who were employed by a company which is registered in the Middle East. This is a company which provides training services, maintenance services, and other maritime services. They were a growing concern, a company which has done quite well, and they established themselves in Qatar as well. They were involved in training activities for the Qatar Navy. At some stage last year, there were serious allegations of espionage which were leveled against the 1 Indian sailor and the 7 officers. It caught everybody entirely by surprise. At one stage, as I mentioned, they were told that you need to leave this country. They were in fact on the verge of leaving, physically on the verge of leaving, when they were told, no, you are in fact being detained in this case. Since then, they were kept in confinement. Over a period of time, there was limited consular access which was granted. They were, of course, given lawyers, but given the nature of the allegations, espionage, very, very serious charges, it went through the legal system over there. And despite the fact that over a period of time, the government of India did step up its engagement with the government of Qatar. Remember, India-Qatar are strategic partners. It was a surprise to everyone when they were sentenced to death. Since then, India has again moved forward, and the fact that Prime Minister Modi now appears to be directly involved in talks with the Emir of Qatar seems to give you an idea of where this is headed. Hopefully for the families, everybody else, these men will be released sooner than later.